Okay, good evening. Good to see everyone. And this class is recorded, so also those who are seeing the recording. Every class, or many of the classes, are built on previous classes. So I recommend, if you're listening to the series, to start from class 1, work your way up to class 3, because we will try to repeat the important principles, but it will give a clearer picture and a better understanding of every class if you have the background from the previous classes. Why is that important? Because today's class is a continuation of previous classes and builds upon it. The concept we're going to discuss today is called Hagbarat Zerem. Hagbarat Zerem is raising the electric current, not creating electrical current, not closing a circuit. Rather, you have a circuit, you have electricity already running in the system, and you want to change the voltage, change the amount of electricity in the system. What issue is that? Now, this is a very important question that was first raised when it came to hearing aids. Hearing aids, those who, if you hear me, that means either you're using one or you're it. Either way, hearing aids, my grandparents all have it, and those who had, and some of them have, hearing aids. It's very, very common. And the question came up, the Gdolei Poskim, previous generation, last generation, can you have hearing aids on Shabbat? So they went and dealt with the question, okay, what's the problem with electrical devices? And can you apply that to hearing aids? Now, what they were very much aware of throughout the entire halachic discussion, this is very interesting, was they were on one hand wanted, you see in their writing, they have a high motivation to allow hearing aids, to find reasons why deaf or hard of hearing can use hearing aids on Shabbat, but at the same time, they don't want people to use microphones. Even though, if you break it down, hearing aids are small microphones. We have some hearing aids that are implants, but the simple hearing aids are just microphones, very advanced small microphones. But they didn't want to allow microphones. Some of the posting write, it's the Reform use microphones in their synagogues or whatever, their Beit Knesset. You have Christians also in the churches use microphones, and they didn't want microphones to be permitted. That's also very clear. So we're going to try and see how they're able, on one hand, to allow hearing aids, at the same time, forbid using microphones. Okay, so we're going to start from their journey. The first question is, why should it be forbidden? What problem can there be with using an electrical microphone, hearing aid on Shabbat, or microphone in general? So what issue? Let's review the various isurim, the various options that were discussed in previous generations. Why electricity, using electrical devices on Shabbat in general, why turning on a fan is forbidden? The first approach we saw was the Rav Kook's approach, and he said it's fire. Well, that wasn't accepted. The second generation said, no, not that your electricity is fire, rather the spark, that when you close a circuit, a spark is created, and creating a spark, a fire, is forbidden from the rabbis. And you can't, it's molid esh, molid nitzotzot. So does that exist in microphones? The simple answer is no, for two reasons. The first reason is microphones, assuming they're on before Shabbat, hearing aids are on before Shabbat, that spark is usually created when the circuit is closed. But the circuit's already been closed before Shabbat, no sparks are created. Even more so, it's such low voltage, some poskim say, that the sparks that come out are not visible to the human eye and therefore are not considered sparks. So spark wouldn't be an issue. Okay, so those who held that the problem electricity is in closing the circle, you're creating a spark, they would say, microphone, no spark, no problem. What about the approach of the Rishonei Sfarad, Chacham and other poskim that said it's molid? It looks like you're creating something new, and just like you can't change ice into water by crushing it because it looks like you creating the water. Similarly, they said you cannot close the circuit because it looks like you're bringing the object to life. Well, can you say that here? So here, the poskim say also it shouldn't be a problem. Why? Because molid is when I'm bringing it to life. That's what the problem molid is. It's dormant. It's just an object. Now it comes to life, so it looks like I created something. If the microphone was on before Shabbat, I'm just using it, then it doesn't look like something new is created. Nothing new happened on Shabbat. The microphone was on before Shabbat. It's being used on Shabbat. Therefore, also, if we go the direction of molid, there should be no problem. What about the Chazon Ish's approach? Chazon Ish said the problem is boneh or makeh patish. He said closing a circuit, you're fixing the circuit. They were building it. A fan that's off is a broken fan, and by closing the circuit, you're fixing the fan. Here comes Rav Shlomo Zalman and says, even if you go by the Chazon Ish's approach, if you're just changing the current, if it's on before Shabbat, and even if you change the current of electricity, there shouldn't be a problem. So also, if you go by the direction of the Chazon Ish, which is the most strict, there should be no issue in using a microphone on Shabbat. Just talk. When I mean using a microphone, again, the microphone is on before Shabbat, and you speak, and your voice is recorded and projected through the speakers. That should be permitted. And that was Rav Shlomo Zalman's final conclusion. He said, changing the current is not a problem. Therefore, not only is it permitted to have a microphone, also if you want to alter the volume. Let's say the volume's on low, and you have I'm not talking about electrical devices that you have to press buttons that also beep or make light, but if it's just a dial that you can move up and down the volume, the higher volume is just more voltage, and lower volume is lower voltage to the speakers. Hiring or lowering the volume is also nothing. It's merely using. You're not molid, you're not creating something new, you're not fixing, you're not boneh. There's no sparks. Therefore, no reason to say it's asur. It should remain mutar. Now, not everyone agreed with this approach. Not the first approach, the second approach. Because Rav Shlomo Zalman, what he did, he took it a step further. The first approach said, well, if the microphone's on, nothing's happening. So there's no molid, the entire list we went through, there's no problem. But like I said, he said, even if you raise the current, that's not an issue. There they already argued on Rav Shlomo Zalman. And many poskim came and said, with all due respect, the Mincha Yitzchak comes and says, changing the current is an issue. Because now the object can do something it couldn't do beforehand. And since it can do something it couldn't do beforehand, then all the problems mentioned beforehand come to exist. It was, if you want to say, boneh, it's broken, it can't do what it could have. It couldn't make a loud sound. Now it could make a loud sound. It couldn't, it looks like something new. Now it's a loudspeaker. Before it was a soft speaker. It was soft, now it's louder. You're changing the essence. They're adding a current is a different use. It's the different volume, a different use, and therefore they said it's forbidden. They agreed with what was said before, that if the microphone is on before Shabbat, on a set volume, and people just speak, and the voices are relayed from the microphone to the speaker, that wouldn't be an issue. But if the current is raising and lowering the volume, that they disagreed and claimed that would be a problem because you notice the change. So that's regarding earpieces, hearing aids. But like I said, even though they want to allow hearing aids, they do not want to allow microphones. But if you go through the checklist, earpieces, hearing aids are just small microphones. So this is they have to do some magic here to allow hearing aids and yet forbid microphones. When I say forbid microphone, a microphone that was on before Shabbat. You got a kid as a bar mitzvah, wants to turn on the microphone before Shabbat and speak for people outside can hear him, want to record himself. They said that's already an issue. Why? So they brought up various reasons. The first reason is called Avshamita, translating making noise. Making noise is a concept that brought in the Gemara. The Gemara says that you shouldn't put wheat in your mill right before Shabbat, but they won't hear the loud grinding noise on Shabbat. It's disrespectful for Shabbat that Shabbat comes in and there's a grounding noise going on. That's making a loud noise in Shabbat is disrespectful for Shabbat. Now this is a kind of a uvdin dechol. It's not the Shabbos atmosphere. The Shabbos, this is not a direct isum melacha, but this is connected to making a loud noise ruins the Shabbos atmosphere. And not only a loud noise of machinery, of chilul Shabbat. Many wanted to forbid even using watches on Shabbat. Or eventually the poskim allowed them, but alarm clocks. Some poskim went as far as said, alarm clock making loud noises on Shabbat is an issue. But most poskim actually eventually allowed alarm clocks. For good or for bad, everyone can choose. But that was the first claim, that when you speakers hearing someone talking on a speaker on Shabbat, it's just not the Shabbos atmosphere, because it's not the noises we should hear on Shabbat. Now that's a bit of a problem. The problem with that is, first of all, many poskim did not agree there's an issue of making noise on Shabbat. They understood the problem of the many poskim explain the problem is not the noise. There's no problem with noise. Noise does not ruin the Shabbos atmosphere. The reason we don't turn on a mill before Shabbat, a wheat mill to ground the wheat, they explained it because people might think you turned it on Shabbat. But just having loud noise on Shabbat of machinery, that's not a problem. And this argument between the poskim, why you can't put wheat in a mill before Shabbat, is it because of the loud grounding noise? Is it because the way people might think you're doing, they think you might have done it on Shabbat, became machlok between the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, the Sfaradim and the Ashkenazim. The Shulchan Aruch is lenient. The Shulchan Aruch said there is no problem to make loud noise on Shabbat. That was the issue. And therefore there's no problem to use alarm clocks, according to Shulchan Aruch. And the Ramah, however, brings the opinion that there might be a problem of making noise. And he only allows it in specific situations. So if you come to the bottom line is, we don't hold by this rule of disrespectful of Shabbat. The only rule, even those who are machmir with loud noises, the only machmir because they're afraid you might have turned it on Shabbat. So if you go back to the microphone, Is there someone hear someone speaking on the microphone? Should you would people think that he turned it on Shabbat? Debatable. Because microphones usually are only turned on before use, then there is logic to say that if you're Ashkenazi, then and you hear someone speaking on a microphone, it would make sense that you turn the microphone on Shabbat. A hearing aid, you wouldn't think that. A hearing aid is supposed to be on all the time. There's no reason to think the guy didn't turn on the hearing aid before Shabbat. But a microphone, it makes sense that if you hear that the guy turned it on before using it. And therefore,
the guy goes to sleep at night. What's he going to do? Leave it on?
The hearing aid? What
Yeah.
the question is, the hearing aid or the microphone?
The hearing aid. Just like you turn off the mic when you leave the shul, you turn off the hearing aid when you go to sleep.
Okay, when it comes to, if the battery doesn't last, it can't last that when you go to sleep. People take off the hearing aid. They don't leave it. They don't leave it in their ear. They take it out when they sleep. So there's no need to turn it off from if your battery doesn't last and you need and the battery runs out, can you recharge it? Can you save battery? Then it really depends on the case. But that's already that has to do with already cholesh and basakana. If it okay, sorry for that. Okay, so there was a question. So we're back trying to understand the difference between a microphone and hearing aid. We said difference number one, it is noise. That a microphone, people might come to think you turned it on Shabbat because that's usually how you use microphones. But hearing aids, people can't leave on all the time. There's no reason to think he turned it on Shabbat. And we'll add to that in many scenarios, it might be permitted, but for refuah reasons or safek pikuach nefesh reasons, for someone with a hearing aid to turn it on Shabbat. But that's besides the point. That's a different issue. Okay, so that's issue number one. Issue number two is interesting. Some poskim, because again, they had motivation to make microphones forbidden. They said it's a musical instrument. All the bands, all the musicians, they use microphones to use for singing. And therefore, just like you can't use any musical instrument on Shabbat, the rabbis forbid us to use a guitar and a piano, then a microphone is a musical instrument. Everyone, all the good singers, every singer that's ever sung professionally sang on microphones. So therefore, it makes a microphone a musical instrument. And musical instruments are muktzah. Very, very original claim. The answer to that is not. People don't see it as a musical instrument. They don't see it as a musical instrument. And even more so, if you go by the logic, musical instruments are forbidden because they might break, a string might tear, you may have to fine tune them. And microphones, that might apply, it depends on microphone. Yeah, many times microphones do cause problems. So in that sense, they are familiar or are similar, or maybe not, depends on maybe the microphone. Now, that so the main claim is against this svara is that a microphone is not a musical instrument. It could be used as a musical instrument, but that's not its purpose. People just as much use it for speeches, for talking, for lecturing. It's also used for music. So if it doesn't have a musical instrument, something that's devoted to be a musical instrument. This is not destined to be specifically a musical instrument. So maybe it doesn't fall under the category of a musical instrument. So if we want to sum up, the second claim is to again, allow a hearing aid and not permit a microphone would be that a microphone might be considered a musical instrument. And just like musical instruments you can't use because you might come to fine tune them on Shabbat, similarly a microphone might need some fine tuning on Shabbat. Those who argue against it say it's not a musical instrument. It's a microphone. That's not its main purpose. It's meant for talking, and you can sing on it, but that's one of its uses. It's not, and and even though what you said it might break down might apply here, that's a chidush. That's a chidush, but it's not under the well-defined Gzerat Chachamim not to use a musical instrument. Okay. Now, where? Okay. So that's also so some of what we said up till now. Microphone hearing aids are permitted, and microphones are not. What another very important use of this current change? We're talking about two very practical uses of them. The idea that this principle that if something's already on, you're only changing the current. It raising the current, it won't be a problem according to the Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, but it might be a problem if you raise the current according to the Mincha Yitzchak and other poskim. So two nafkamina. The first nafkamina is elevators. When an electrical elevator and an electrical motor, when you go into it, then it needs more electricity to carry the weight. So the computer calculates how much electricity and says, okay, this guy's heavy, right? Must be muscle, he's working out. Need more current. So even though the elevator was on before Shabbat and it's on a Shabbos mode, where it's going up and down the elevator shaft, by going in, you're causing it to raise the current. And that's just like the case of the microphone, the hearing aid. Can you raise a current of an electrical device that's already on? So according to Shlomo Zalman, the answer is yes, you can, because causing the current to go up is not an issue. If the electrical device is already on. The problems in microphones, we explain why microphones are forbidden, either musical instrument or because of the noise they make. But here, the change you make in the elevator is not noticeable at all. It's not noticeable that now the current it's using is much higher. You're going the same pace, the elevator is going up and down the same pace it was going beforehand. So there's more electricity in the system now. It's not noticeable. And therefore, if you go by Shlomo Zalman's logic, there's no problem. And that's why elevators, most people were using Shabbos elevators until I think it was 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I think it's 7 years ago, someone went to Rav Eliashiv Zatzal and asked him, what do you hold about Shabbos elevators? About there's more current, etc. The current goes up, and he says it's a problem. And that caused havoc. Because he published it. Rav Eliashiv doesn't hold Auerbach, and raising the current is an issue. And all of a sudden, Shabbos elevators became a problem. All the kablanim, the kablan real estate builders in Israel, those who built for their Haredi communities, freaked out. It was going to cause a tremendous economic crisis because the Haredi community were buying cheap, or still looking to buy cheap, and the cheaper is, the higher is in apartment buildings. And if you want to have a lot of people in a small area, you need apartment buildings that taller better. Now, if you want to sell it to Haredi people on Shabbat, they're going to need a Shabbos elevator. If you have 14 floors, you need a Shabbos elevator. All of a sudden, even though for years Shabbos elevators were okay based on Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach's ruling that changing a current is not an issue, all of a sudden it became an issue. And other rabbis started coming out of the woods saying, yeah, so we agree with that raising the current is an issue. And it was a halachic, an economic mess. Eventually they came and they all got together and they came out with a Chazal, a bunch of rabbis, Chamavadia came out with the ruling that it's okay to use Shabbos elevators, and Machon Tzomet republished with that it's okay to use Shabbos elevators, and they brought other big rabbis to sign on it. And I think they got Rabbi Yashi to say something that it's might be okay. That I don't recall exactly, but he came with a form of retraction. The damage was already done. Many Haredi communities now do not use Shabbos elevators. I have cousins, Haredi, they live in the 4th floor. They do not use elevators on, even Shabbos elevators on Shabbat. Why? Because of this ruling that even raising the current, causing the raising the current is an issue of electricity. But in Tzibur Dati Leumi, the psika and Machon Tzomet's psika that raising that raising the current is not an issue. And therefore, Shabbos elevators are permitted. As I'm assuming people, this is interesting. Interesting scenario where halacha and economics meet. Like this discussion, yeah, okay, is it a problem? It's not a problem. Hearing aid, like, okay, that's not relevant for me. All of a sudden, it becomes relevant for maybe most of the religious community in Israel, living in apartment buildings. It becomes a very big deal for those investors that bought those apartment buildings in Haredi communities, neighborhoods. All of a sudden, they're left with buildings, apartments, and sell. It's fascinating. Halacha and economics meet. Okay. What we have left is last advice that's based on changing halacha, changing electrical current. The first one says the microphone that's on before Shabbat. And I'll say already now, we're gonna have a separate class on that. This includes also the Alexa that's always listening. Yes, Alexa is always listening to what we say. Hello, Alexa, or hello, Google. The microphones are always listening. And by talking with the microphones on, they listen to what you say and a current changes. The same argument would apply. Discussion applies there, but there it's more complicated. We are going to have a separate class on Alexa. But what's left is the Shabbos carts, those golf carts that elderly people, Machon Tzomet sell to people who can't walk to shul. It's difficult for them, or slippery roads, or up or top hills for them to walk. They have we've all seen them. These golf carts. Now these golf carts, they work on 2 principles. The first principle, this is where we attach to last week's class. Last week's class, we said that we brought big machloket between the Tzitz Eliezer and Rav Moshe Feinstein and Chamavadia and Rabinowitz, whether a machine that's built by grama, by indirect damage, indirectly, does the heter of a grama of indirect activation, does it apply or not? Meaning, we were talking about a Shabbos clock. I built a machine called a Shabbos clock that's supposed to turn on lights. I flip a switch and 10 minutes from now it's going to turn on. Is that considered a drug? That's
Okay, thanks. 1 second.
No,
have a small piece.
Judah, you might want to go on to mute.
Yeah. So they claim if you build a machine that's supposed to work on the principle of grama, you can't claim grama anymore, because grama is when you don't have melech machshevet. You're not doing it the normal way. I put empty vessels of water in front of the fire. Okay, that's not the normal. Normally, you pour water on the fire. Here, you put the vessels in front of them, and they broke, shattered, and extinguished the fire. That's considered indirect. But if you build a mechanism that's supposed to indirectly turn on a light, then that's a problem. That's melech machshevet. That is, it becomes the normal way of doing it, because you built the machine to do it that way. That becomes the normal way. That's why zoreh and cooking is, you can't say, oh, grama. No, the normal way of cooking is via grama. That means I put the pot on the fire, put the food on the fire, and then only 10 minutes later, the food get cooked. Okay, but that's a normal way of doing it. So you can't claim grama. Seemingly, if you make a machine like a Shabbos clock for grama, it wouldn't be considered grama. The other opinion of Shlomo Zalman Auerbach claimed no. And if there's a time delay, it is considered grama. So if you go talk about these carts, these golf carts, then they put a grama mechanism in it, meaning you turn a switch, nothing happens. A few seconds later, the machine goes on. But that ruling would only be okay if you go by of Shlomo Zalman. If you went by Rabbeinu, if you went by Tzitz Eliezer, those golf carts would be an issue. And therefore, they added another mechanism to make it even more lenient. And that is that the carts are already on before Shabbat. You turn on the motor before Shabbat on a very low current. And all you're doing on Shabbat is raising the current. When you go and now in a certain level, the current gets so strong that the wheels actually start turning. And that's when you drive. So if the current is, I'm making up numbers, 12 kilowatts, and that 12 kilowatts is not enough to have the wheels turn. So from before Shabbat, you turn on the golf cart, it's on 12 kilowatts of electricity being used up. Now all you're doing on Shabbat, you want to go forward. You say, I want to go forward. What you're not turning on the device. You're saying add more electricity, raise the current, raise it until the wheels start turning. And like we said, Rav Shlomo Zalman claimed that if the electricity is already on before Shabbat, and all you do is raise the current, then that's nothing. That's just using the object. There's no more lead, there's no bonnet, they're not building anything, not fixing anything. You're not creating something new. So this principle of changing the current is not an issue. It's used in these electrical carts of Machon Tzomet. They usually use a combination of grama, doesn't happen immediately, and the raising of the current. That means a few seconds after you press the button, the current starts raising, going up, and the wheels start moving. Now, why do they use two principles? Again, like we said, many argued on Rav Shlomo Zalman regarding the raising of the current. And they said, if the current raises and the change is not noticeable, you can't notice the change in electricity, that's okay. But once the current changes and you notice it, the volume is now higher. You notice the change in electricity. The wheels start moving. That's a noticeable change of the current. As soon as it's noticeable, you can't say you didn't do anything. Here, you did something. You fixed it, you built it, you created something new. All the problems we saw that might exist with electricity come into and apply. So these carts, they use two principles. Each of them argued upon, but together, combining them, they say there's enough reasons to be lenient to allow to use these golf carts on Shabbat for the uses of people that want to go to Beit Knesset, they want to travel, it's too difficult for them to go on foot. So those are three examples for when the electrical system is already on, you just want to change the current. We talked about hearing aids and microphones and the difference between them, why even though hearing aids are permitted, microphones didn't get that permission. We talked about the elevators, where Shabbos elevators, again, before Shabbat, activating is going in, you're causing the current to go up. Is that a problem or not? We talked about how that almost created a mashber diur even worse than we have today. And we talked about how these golf carts, how Machon Tzomet uses this principle. Now, Machon Tzomet uses many, many mechanisms on this principle. Not only the golf cart, they have Shabbos phones. Shabbos phones, which phones are always on to talk between. They allowed to use the phone, not cell phones, not smartphones, but actually dial phones. They built dial phones that you can use on Shabbat, built on that principle. The electricity is always, those phones are always on. When you dial, then you're just changing electrical occurrences, creating a number, and that number, you call someone. And when you talk to the other person on the phone, based on Shlomo Zalman, you're not doing anything. All you're doing is changing the electrical current. And that's translated into voice. Nothing. So they built phones built on that principle.
Is that
Can
to
you
use
direct-
only, is that for use only in certain circumstances, or that would be for anybody?
These principles of Shlomo Zalman said, I'm putting my neck out there against all these poskim for people in need. For cholim she'em b'hem sakana, for people that can't go to shul, for people that need it, right? If it wasn't for people of need, I'm not willing to stick my neck out. Halachic neck out, meaning he had both of these principles he brought down, people argued on him. And he would have to be very brave. But I heard once from a rabbi from Mechon Tzoma, he said that Rav Shlomo Zalman called them and said, listen, you build it, I'll back you up. I have your back. I'll make it permitted. I'll take it. So he was definitely goal-oriented. But because he was goal-oriented, he was weary all the time to say, this is for remember why I'm allowing this. Because the guy just wants to use a microphone for fun. Again, microphones are usually not hearing aids. That's a great example. Where you could have very easily, based on the same principle, allow a microphone. No one allows a microphone. Why? Because it's obvious microphones there's no need to use a microphone. A real need. Unlike a hearing aid. When it came a need like a Shabbos elevator, that's a real need. Not someone sick, but like you want someone to we can't afford affordable housing because I can't buy anything that's not ground floor or third or fourth floor because I can't use a Shabbos elevator. That's considered need already. So it's not necessarily need of pikuach nefesh, safek pikuach nefesh, but definitely the rabbi it's local heterim for scenarios where there is motivation to be lenient. That motivation could be economic. Where some always said the motivation for the poskim to allow it. The motivation can be economic. It can be for health reasons, but there has to be motivation. If there's no motivation, the rabbis who are lenient say, "Listen, there is a svara to say there's a problem here." Okay, so why be lenient if there's no reason to be? Okay, that's today's class. Next week we're gonna start talking about smartphones, and they will move forward to Alexa, smart houses, smartwatches, and so on. Everyone, stay healthy and stay inside if you can. It's cold outside.
Good. It
Laila tov.
was great.
Thank you.